Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silverline Silver Sunday, this February the 12th, 2023. If you're here with us, that means you're not watching the big game, so thank you. I had to remind myself that there was a big game on today. In fact,
what game is that?
I had to ask a friend of mine last night. I said, you know what? I'm not even sure who's playing this year. And he was like, how can you not know? I'm like, I know now, but because he told me.
I don't. Okay, what is it?
It's
baseball,
football,
right?
It's the Super Bowl. I've never been in the Super Bowl before. I don't really know that.
Is it the final?
It is the final. Yeah, it's the final.
Wow.
It's the
final what?
The Gold Cup or whatever it is. I'm here tonight with the regulars, Thomas Florimani. Say hi, Tommy.
Howdy do, everybody.
And we're here with Mr. Peter Clinton from across the way. Say hi, Mr. Pete.
Hello.
And we have a special guest with us tonight, Mr. Gregory Wright. How are you, sir?
I'm still alive and kicking.
Now, geographically, where are you joining us from?
I'm in Long Island, New York at the moment.
Okay. And is this where you call
we're
home?
Having a weird winter. It's been brutally cold and then like 60 degrees.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's supposed to get so Tommy is he and I are both in Orlando. And I think Tommy, it's supposed to get cold tonight. I think it's supposed to get down.
It's kind of chilly out there right now, but it's not going to stay that way.
No.
Yeah, well, it's still a little early for it to be this warm, but I guess global heating. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, so tonight, we're going to pelt Mr. Wright with all kinds of questions about comics, his career, see if he and Tommy can ever remember what they worked on together, and hopefully, if I have my way, we're going to get into talking about some comic book editing as well. A couple of quick comments here. Let's see here. It's a daring and funny book. I'm not sure what that one it means, but okay. Comic Talks with Pop says, hey, yo, what's up, Pop? Vic says, Bonacera, Silverliners.
He keeps talking in some other language. Who knows what he keeps saying? I don't know.
He says the channel calls are already so outdated. Well, I can only put up there what you give me. I got invited to a Super Bowl party, but I got pages to push out. There you go, Vic. That's what we're talking about right there. So, first thing, I'm going to ask the first question, Tommy. I know you said you got one. But my first question to you is going to be, what is your origin story? How did you get started in comics?
Well, like everybody that's in comics, at some point, my grandma bought me a comic book. But it never occurred to me that could be a job. Yeah. These were, that was not something that was feasible to even consider. So I just, got lots of comics and really enjoyed them. And then I went to school at New York University to become the next Martin Scorsese / Steven Spielberg. And they don't really teach you how to get into the film industry. So I needed a job when I graduated and had no idea what I was going to do. But luckily, one of my very best friends, Ginge Gingerton, editor and writer, he'd gotten a paid internship that turned into an assistant editor job at Epic Comics. And he said, well, we need a new editorial assistant. You should come interview. I said, oh, okay, sounds like a plan. So I went in to interview at Epic with Joe Duffy. And while I was interviewing with Joe for this position, this, sort of short guy with a mustache and glasses comes wandering in and looks at me and he says, oh, don't mind me. I'm only in charge. And I realized it was Archie Goodwin.
Oh, cool.
Who was one of the few people, names in comics I really knew, because I had read a lot of stuff that he had done, specifically Manhunter with Walt Simonson. And he'd done a bunch of really good movie adaptations, again, with Walt. So I was a little bit sort of stunned. And he's like emptying candy into this jar. And he's like, well, would you like some candy? And I'm like, no. The rest of my interview was a little strange because I was suddenly aware of where I was.
Yeah.
But they offered me the job and I thought, well, can I have 24 hours to think about it? Because that seemed like the thing that you do.
Sure.
And Joe Duffy looked at me and she said, well, sure, you can have 24 hours. But if I talk to somebody else who wants the job and, today you won't be getting the job.
they're getting it.
I guess I'm saying yes. So that was how I got into comics as an editorial assistant, which was actually more of a receptionist / secretary position in which they had almost nothing for me to do.
Wow.
Because there was two offices at Epic. One was Archie Goodwin and Joe Duffy's. And they liked having a receptionist and they liked having somebody type and file for them. And the other one was Margaret Clark and Ginge Gingerton. And they liked to answer their own phone and type their own memos. So I mostly kind of sat there and answered the phone. And Archie took pity because, he knew what my background was in film. And whenever I wasn't working, he said, I want you to read everything that we put out at Epic. So I did. I read everything they ever had done. And then I would read everything that was being done. And he would quiz me and ask me questions. So I started learning, about comics and how it related to that. But, he never treated me like, some little punk fanboy that was there. He was honestly interested in my opinion. Did this make sense? How did this work? And the people that I was talking to right away was Frank Miller and, Mark DeMatteis and Jay Muth and Bill Sienkiewicz and, the Peenies and, all these people that were doing all this were Jim Starlin, Howard Chaykin. So this was my introduction to comics, was talking to like the cream of the crop on creator-owned material, which is very different from the Marvel material. So from there, I moved to Marvel, and again, Archie and the Epic department basically spoke highly of me to Mark Grunwald. So I started working for Mark, and things were very different on the Marvel side because on the Epic side, it was all about making the creators very happy. And on the Marvel side, it was who gives a shit what the creators want. We're in charge. We will hire and fire who we want, regardless of what you think. And we don't really, and they had no idea how production value wasn't something they understood. So they had to depend on the stupid production manager Marvel had. Whereas at Epic, they understood production.
Right.
So I could not believe this. So I began trying to make some changes in Mark's office, at least, so that a creator had a little bit more say when there was an opportunity to say, well, if you hate this inker, who would you like? Who can I try to get? Well, what exactly is it you don't like about this? I can talk to the inker about this. But, you know, we didn't really have any good inkers in Mark's office. We only had Tom Palmer and Joe Sinnott and Joe Rubenstein.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I was working with, you know, John Buscema was penciling, and, you know, we had Bob Layton and Mark Bright on Iron Man. And so, you know, I stumbled right into
a nice situation.
You know, Mark was fantastic, and all the people working there were fantastic. So I got this great education into becoming an editor, because I had, you know, the entire Epic department, Archie Goodwin, then I had Mark Grunwald, and I had every creator that came in were happy to share everything that they could, because I was curious and I would ask, and I didn't pretend I knew stuff I didn't know at the time, because I didn't know anything. You know, I knew story from a filmmaking perspective, but, you know, comics are different.
So you didn't have any creator come to you, and I won't call his name, and tell you after you have offered a suggestion to his story, kid, I've written more comic books than you've ever read. I know how to make a comic book a hit.
Oh, I had people say stuff like that, sure.
I bet you
did. But the thing was, most of the creators that I talked to had no idea that I was a kid at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them came in and they were like, "Holy crap, you're like a kid," and I'm like,
"This was your mullet years, right?"
Yeah, oh yeah, that was my mullet years. Yeah, the big mullet. I love that mullet.
Yeah. So this would have been what, 87?
I had that until I went freelance, and after that, then I grew my hair really long and grew a beard.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to buy a house, and I thought, no one's ever gonna
sell a house to
give me a bank loan or sell me a house looking like like this. So I cut it all off and shaved and tried to at least look respectable.
Yeah. So your first year, what, 87?
It was 86 when I started.
86. Okay.
Yeah. Right out of college.
Wow. Yeah. So I remember. So when you moved over to, I mean, I read the Epic stuff. I remember it. And I still own a lot of it. But obviously the Marvel stuff for me was more memorable. So you went over to Grunewald's office. What were the titles that you worked on?
Well, the big thing that we worked on in that office was the Handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Okay.
So that and
all
again,
fans know that one.
Working on that, I got to learn every single character, all their histories, and working with Peter Sanderson. And this also meant I worked with almost every single artist in the industry, because that was my job, was to hire all the artists for Marvel Universe. Some of them were people that Mark wanted hired, but I started hiring people that Jim Shooter really hated, like Keith Giffen and Kevin Nolan and Bill Sienkiewicz and Todd McFarlane, and people who actually had a different style.
Right.
What
Not
Jim
a house style.
Shooter, and Shooter really wanted was, he wanted Joe Rubenstein to take everybody's drawings and make them look the same. And Shooter yelled at Joe about that, and then he yelled at me, and I was like, no. And I said, the readers like to see these different artists. And Joe said, but Jim, they don't start out drawing the same.
Right.
And Jim Stewart's like, well, we hired you to make it all look the same. It's like, you're not going to be able to take Keith Giffen and make it look like John Romita. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if Giffen wanted to draw a John Romita style, he could do it. But he was drawing in that sort of wonky Keith Giffen style, which is exactly why I hired him. So we did that. And then we did the Avengers book. So we did the Avengers, West Coast Avengers, Iron Man. And then we were starting the solo Avengers book, and Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D.
And I think the West Coast Avengers, Tommy, help me out here. I think, wasn't that Steven's first Marvel work, the West Coast Avenger? So Stephen Butler was my roommate. Stephen Butler was my roommate, and of course he's our buddy. I want to say the West Coast Avengers was Steven's first Marvel work.
Really?
I think. Don't hold me to that. Don't quote me.
His first regular title was Silver Sable with me.
Yes, that was a regular.
I remember that.
That was regular.
A fill-in or two. I think he might have done a Spider-Man fill-in. It's possible he could have done a West Coast Avengers. I didn't know I had no idea who Steven was when I got Silver Sable, which is a whole other story. And they're like, well, he looks like Jim Lee and Mark Bagley. And I thought, well, that's an interesting combination. So I had no idea. I wrote the first issue of that like over the weekend because they fired the original writer, for writing crap. And the original artist was supposed to be somebody else. And I said, well, who's drawing the book? And they went, Stephen Butler. And I went, who? So I wrote it not knowing what Stephen's stuff was like. And I just hoped that we would mesh. And we meshed great. Stephen's,
he always spoke when he was working with you that he loved working with you.
It was so nice. And I'll tell you what, I gave him so much stuff to draw. And he drew every bit of it. He never slacked, not once, and he drew details, and he's great. I love working with him.
Stephen did Avengers West Coast number 70. So and then I do know he because I think he was still my roommate at the time. But I do know that he did some Web of Spider-Man fill-ins. He did the Scarlet Spider stuff, some of that. And I think all of that kind of came before he did the Silver Sable stuff.
Yeah, well, I know he was a regular Spider-Man penciler at one point after Silver Sable because he
that's when all the clone stuff started.
One of the Spider-Man books, which I understood that you don't say no to a book that sells hundreds of thousands of copies when we weren't.
Right. Yeah, and it's Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's who doesn't want to draw Spider-Man?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I had those two reversed then.
It was so long ago now. It's like it's kind of frightening.
Yeah,
we were just little kids.
Oh man. But I and I'm sure you remember this too. I tell people it was such a different day because in the 90s, now my first thing came in like 89. So I didn't get my start till in the independent market until several years after that. But there was so much money in comics in the early 90s. We're gonna have Tommy share while we're talking here. There was so much money in the early 90s for all the Marvel was selling outrageous numbers of copies, and of course Image came along then, and their comics sold like crazy. Malibu, where I was, we were selling books right and left. Which for not Marvel numbers, but it was very healthy for the independent.
It was fantastic for everybody.
Yeah, we were making money.
Yeah, and making comics. There was a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to make comics. And any of us that have made comics ever know it's like a dream come true.
Yeah.
You'll never want to do anything else. It's nothing. No matter how bad anything ever got, it's still. You're telling stories, you're drawing pictures, you're coloring artwork, people are reading it, it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And of course I also say, once it gets in your blood, it doesn't go away,
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Vic said, when I heard small guy with bushy stash and glasses, I was like Stan Lee. Stan was already on the West Coast by that point in time.
Yeah, well, Stan had almost nothing to do with Marvel, really, at that point. He was kind of like a little mascot.
Yeah.
And he was mostly trying to write screenplays and stuff out on the West Coast. And he dropped by every once in a while to kind of give us a pep talk, which was, cool because, you got to hang out with Stan Lee and, it's Stan, and if Stan was going to do some project, we'd be like, yeah, we want to work on that, and there's a few infamous projects I said yes to because Stan was working on them and they were horrible, but was Stan Lee and we said yes, and then we went, what happened here?
Yeah.
Not Stripperella. I avoided Stripperella.
Oh man, I remember that one.
I was part of the Nightcat crew, so.
Oh yeah, okay. That was what Jimmy Palmiotti did that, didn't he?
Oh, it was me and it was Stan sort of wrote it, and then I think Jim Salicrup might have wrote some of it. Barry Dutter scripted it, I think, and then Dennis Cowan drew it.
Okay.
Palmiotti inked it, and I colored it. I think Janice Chang probably lettered it.
Oh, cool.
And we all went, "What did we sign up for?"
I think I have a copy of that somewhere.
Yeah, it keeps popping up on my feed, and I'm like, "Oh God, this will never go away."
Is that one of those books that someone brings up to you at a show and says, "Hey, will you sign a copy of this?" And you're like, "Where did
Like,
you
I
find
don't
this?"
remember doing
I
that.
you know, back in the day when I used to go to a con and have a table, yeah, I said people brought it up. I mean, it was a great Joe Jusko cover. Best thing about that book
Yeah.
is, you know, Joe Jusko did this beautiful cover, and
It is.
the girl it's based on was very sweet. You know, she came in and we got to meet her, and she was very, very sweet, and you know, much prettier than she is in the book. She even had a little recording career that, you know, didn't last at all. But the whole thing was just so bizarre,
Yeah.
you know. But you know, but it was a chance to work with Stan and, you know, get to chat with Stan on the phone a little more, and you know,
I don't know
and he's
anyone
fun
who
to
would
talk
turn
to.
that down.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
You know, now he's not. But
Yeah. It's funny because when Marvel purchased Malibu, one of the things that they asked my editor-in-chief, they said, what do you guys want? What can we do for you? And our editor-in-chief, Chris Alm, said, we want to meet Stan Lee. So they arranged a lunch for us, and all of of course, we were, Malibu was in California. And so all of the editorial staff went to about this 3-hour-long lunch with Stan Lee, where I don't even remember where we went, but he just sat there and told stories the whole time.
that's what he does.
Yep. And
good stories.
Fantastic stories. Great.
Yeah, he's very entertaining.
Very entertaining.
You know, he was always such a nice guy. You know, I hate when people say crap about him, because you know, he was really a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, you can from my perspective, you can you can't. So I had to unsubscribe from some Facebook groups here recently just because there was a lot of negative Stan Lee energy on there.
Oh yeah.
And my problem is this: is like, you know, Stan Lee has been one of the greatest ambassadors for comic books that we have ever had. Why would you want to trash him? Why not try to lift somebody else up rather than trash him? And so, you know, I love Jack Kirby. I love Steve Ditko.
Me too.
I love all those folks, but I'm not going to trash Stan at their expense. You know?
No, this is where we are in our culture is, you know, nobody wants to listen to anything, and we want to try to make everybody into some kind of an enemy. And it's just not true.
Yeah.
You know, people have made some mistakes, and, you know, they don't need to be crucified over that for the next, 50 years.
Agreed.
You know, and that's the whole thing. You know, it's like Stan didn't sit there and go, let me see how I can screw these guys over. You know,
right. Yeah.
You know, and they left. You know, I mean, they could have made lots of money. They left. You know, and Stan stayed, and Marvel made more money after they left. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you that a little bit. And like I said before we started, if it ever gets into anything that you don't want to talk about, just say so. So you know, after Stan left, there was the sort of the revolving door of editors, editor-in-chiefs, I should say, and then Shooter came on and was kind of at the helm for throughout the decade of the 80s. I don't remember the exact years, but he was pretty much the 80s guy, right?
Yeah.
So I never worked with, I have met Shooter. I've never worked with him, and I absolutely 100% know that those are two different things. as a fan and as someone who looks at, you know, the content, that kind of thing, I'm a fan of what transpired in Marvel Comics in the 1980s. Okay. However, so many people that I admire, creators and respect, and not everybody who worked with it, but some of them, you know, condemn him for a lot of the things he's done. Now, again, we don't like to do a whole lot of negative on our show, but you got to work with him. So what would you say? Would you say some of the, I'm trying to word this in a way that we don't get negative. Would you say some of the heat that Jim gets is fair, unfair? What was it like working for him? And then when he was gone, you you guys went straight from him to the 5 editors, right?
No. We went from Jim Shooter to Tom DeFalco.
Oh, that's right. To Tom DeFalco, and then to the 5 editors.
It gets fuzzy, because there's so many things that happened very quickly.
Yeah.
At various times that I wasn't in the office, so I'm not sure what happened when Tom left.
Okay.
There's various versions of the story.
So you got out of the office when then?
What's
so
that?
You started in the office in '86.
Yeah.
And then you exited the office when?
I exited sometime 92 or 93.
Okay.
I worked with Tom. Tom was the editor in chief the entire time that I was an editor.
Okay.
Because Tom promoted me to being an editor because, yes, that's a whole other story.
Okay.
But I mean, it's a good story. But so when I started at Epic, Shooter had just kind of finished off Secret Wars and thought that because of the success of Secret Wars, he knew better than anybody about everything. So he became very much of a dictator and would say things like, my version of the characters that I wrote in Secret Wars is the version, and everyone has to write that version of this character the exact way I wrote it. But he left Epic alone. Mostly because he, from what I understand, he kind of screwed Archie Goodwin out of the editor-in-chief job back when. So Archie being at Epic, and again, everybody respected Archie. Right. So he just let Archie do whatever Archie was going to do. So, Shooter seemed a little scared of Archie when I was at Epic, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. But everybody else was, not so much. But, while I was there at Epic, he fired Mike Carlin. And then the next thing you know, he's firing Jim Owsley. And this was this is when the new universe was starting. And again, I postulate that there's a word I never use.
Welcome to comic books.
I know,
good
right?
Comic book word.
I've always felt that he really hated that every comic book said Stan Lee presents. When Stan Lee really didn't present anything. Jim Shooter did all the work behind the scenes. He was the one yelling at us and making things go. So, I think he felt like it should say Jim Shooter presents. I've done the work. And the new universe, I kind of thought was maybe his way of, I'll show everybody how it's supposed to be done. But, again, he had to micromanage it to the point where no one wanted to work on it at all.
Yeah.
And if you ever look at, who was on those books that started out with, because, Archie Goodwin created half of it. Mark Grunwald has probably created a book, that is the only book that I felt really stuck to it. Shooter did one book, and they sort of forced John Romita to do it. And Shooter's book was good. He actually, because Shooter's a really terrific writer. You can't take. He's an incredibly complex, interesting, and talented man. But he was a dictator, and he made most of our lives on staff when I moved over to Marvel miserable. And creators were leaving and stuff, and no, it wasn't fair. And he would come in, tell us we had to do stuff like, I can still remember, I was too stupid to understand that he could fire me. So I would just say what was on my mind. Mark Grunwald figured out how to get out of it. He would leave the office somehow every time Jim was coming, so I had to have to face Jim by myself.
We've heard those stories.
That's a Grunwald thing to do. Isn't it?
I don't know how he did it. He somehow sensed that Shooter was coming, and he would leave, and Shooter would come back with all these pages to tell me what was wrong with everything that we'd already approved. He would tell us we were not allowed to tell the creators that these changes were being asked for by him. We were to tell them that they were being asked for because we felt this way. And I said, well, I've already told Tom Palmer what a great job he's doing. So I'm not calling him up and reversing that. If you would like to do that, be my guest. Or let's go see John Romita. Let's see if John Romita has this kind of opinion. And this was a very typical thing that he would just constantly pick on stuff that didn't need to be picked on. And he would just sort of suck the creative juices out of the room. We actually, I didn't really have a big part. I was in the room, but the entire staff barged in on him one day and let him have it. We took Mike Hobson with us so that they could see how we really felt about Jim Shooter.
Yeah.
Because Shooter would tell the higher ups that the staff would walk if they fired him. Not true. And the thing is the thing that they didn't like about Shooter was he was actually doing a lot to defend creators and the books, because he didn't he really thought that his way was the best way. He wasn't like he wasn't like this evil guy. I mean, some people might say he was, but he just, the manner in which he dealt with everybody was very off-putting, and he was he was an intimidating guy.
He's a big guy.
People were afraid of him.
He's very tough.
And if you disagreed, you could be fired.
Yeah.
At any moment. And we saw, it was like 4 or 5 people got fired. And creators may be told, I don't want you using this creator, or I need you to give Vinnie Coletta work. It was not a good time. Mark Grunwald wore black, up until the day he was fired at one point, and used to kind of sit at his desk looking down at whatever I put by him, because that was the mood that he had inspired. So
wow.
When he got fired and Tom took over, it was great.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks, it would seem to me that's too bad. You know what I mean? Because when you look at somebody's body of work and you say, oh, this is, as a whole, again, oh, this is kind of nice, but then you hear these stories and you're like, oh, I hate to hear that. That's terrible. But I think it's sad from what it sounds like. No one likes to be micromanaged.
No, nobody likes it.
I don't care what job you do.
That.
Yeah.
But again, the work that he has done, prior to that, during that, that is good. That work is still good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still he's very entertaining to talk to. He's great with the fans. He kind of plays fast and loose with the truth, I have to say.
Really?
But I think a lot of us do. I try not to. Because I made some colossal blunders, and I'm happy to humiliate myself, because that way nobody else can.
Right.
But it was a very big difference. The entire mood of Marvel shifted as soon as Shooter was removed.
Yeah.
And Tom was great. I could never say anything bad about Tom. Not that I agreed with him every time, but I really enjoyed working with Tom, both as a creator and as an editor. With him, he was wonderful to work with, and he was fun.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all married here, so I think we can agree. The only person you agree with all the time is your wife, right?
If it's good for you.
Right. So let's see here. Vic says it was about modern Marvel numbers, right? I'm not sure what that's in reference to, Vic. Jay Lee says, good evening, everyone. What's up, Jay? Thank you for joining us here. Vic says, I would work on the worst title you can think of with a $1 page rate just to work with Stan Lee. Granted, that's not a possibility anymore.
A lot of us probably would say that same thing.
Yeah, I think so.
You want to work with Stan at least once. I mean, there's a lot of people. I worked on as a freelancer. I worked on stuff that paid me very little because it was a great project.
Yeah.
And then I worked on some stuff that paid me really well that I didn't really like, because that allowed me to take this thing that I got paid almost nothing to do.
Right.
That I'm still proud of. And, one of the things I worked on that I'm most proud of is Starman over at DC with James Robinson and Tony Harris. And what cracks me up is it's one of the most reprinted pieces of work I've ever worked on. They continuously reproduce these, like 3-inch thick tomes of Starman. I'm constantly getting, hardcovers and giant.
Did you color that?
What?
Did you color that?
Yeah, I colored that.
Yeah. Cool.
So it's very cool to say, okay, this paid me very little money, but Archie Goodwin had hired me for that.
Right.
I wasn't going to not work with Archie, but I love working with James Robinson. I love working with Tony Harris. I love working with Wade Von Grabecker. I loved the entire crew on that. And I colored almost the entire, run.
Nice.
But that's the thing, when you get on you will take less to be involved with something great. And that's why I wound up doing Nightcat, so I can say, okay, well, I did this,
right.
Although, doing the Marvel Masterworks, I had to talk to Stan and have him write introductions for me. So, I didn't get to work with Stan as often as I would have liked, but I I got to work with him enough. And you always got a bunch of fun stories with him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Vic said that Miss Fury side profile is beautiful, Pete. There you go. He's talking about that there. Yeah.
We redraw that eye.
Oh, let's go. No.
That eye's bad.
Yeah. Hey, Tommy, here's what an eye looks like.
I'll send you a picture. Just get rid of that. But thank you.
How's that?
Is
that better?
Greg, you missed that last week. They were they were looking at a fist, the character Tommy was inking, and Pete literally took a picture of his hand and sent it to Tommy and said, "Draw it like that."
I had forgotten to finish part of the hand, so
it's fun to watch somebody. I love watching you ink on here because once upon a time, I had people in my office penciling and inking and lettering and coloring right in front of me, and now so much is just done totally digital. There's not even any real pages.
Yeah.
And I miss that because, if you came into my office at any time, there was a drawer full of beautiful John Buscema, Tom Palmer pages, Mark Silvestri pages, Todd McFarlane, Joe, all these artists from Marvel Universe, Al Williamson pages. These are people that I'm just talking with on a daily basis. And I get to hold this art in my hand as long as I want and look at it, and when I was at Epic, Bill Sienkiewicz is coming in with those beautiful painted pages from, Elektra Assassin. And, I'm chatting with Bill while we're, gluing statted panels down, and then he's whipping paint out, and that there's nothing like that. Now you barely even get to talk to an editor on the phone. That you'll get a text. Oh, by the way, blah blah blah.
Right, man. You mentioned Buscema and Palmer. I'm a big Avengers fan, and that's when Marvel bought Malibu. I got to talk to Mark a lot about that. And who else? Macchio.
Ralph.
Yeah.
My favorite editor to work with is a writer.
Oh, really? Ralph was? Oh, cool. But so if I'm not mistaken, were you an assistant on that Roger Stern, Buscema, Palmer run of Avengers?
Yeah.
Yes, what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there when Roger was infamously fired.
Oh my goodness. That is one of my favorite, probably of the more modern Avengers story. That's a great run. Roger Stern is I think a great writer. Very undervalued.
Roger's a wonderful writer. And the funny thing about having to write like the Avengers is you have to make do with what characters are available at the time because of Marvel continuity.
Yes.
So Roger was especially good at figuring out what to do with, the characters that were available, because sometimes the main characters weren't available and you had to bring in some new characters and you had to make them interesting and you had to figure out stories that were still good. And he was very good at that particular type of thing. And, he was very good at taking some lesser known characters and giving them a little boost and some integrity.
I have a lot of really favorite Avengers runs, as you might imagine, of stories, but that is probably one of the last ones that really, really stands out to me. Run through some more of these comments here. Vic said, answer it like when I asked so we had Marv Wolfman on our screen here. and he asked a question about Shooter, and Marv's answer was yes. Next question.
Yeah. Marv was not treated well. Again, there's a lot of creators that Shooter, I don't know that he necessarily meant to be horrible to them, but there's a line of them that they'll have nothing nice to say.
Yeah, and see, I love Marv Wolfman, right? I think he's a fantastic writer. I had to, he wrote an introduction for the miniseries that Tommy and I worked on, and to hear him say something like that, again, kind of as a fan, it's a little bit heartbreaking because you're like, man, really? You don't, like, mom and dad don't like each other, right?
Yeah.
I was like, no, why? I don't want that.
I mean, Marv's a good guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I like I said, I never
worked
a lot of stuff I love.
Yeah, and I never worked with Shooter, so I can't say anything like that. But when I hear people like you and like others say things like this, it's like, no, don't crush me, don't crush my heart this way. You know.
Well, there were people that worked with Shooter that have nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those things that there were people that I don't think Larry Hama had any issues with him.
Oh, okay.
As a really good example, talk about a guy. Few people have as much integrity as Larry Hama.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think he ever had. But I think Shooter might have been kind of terrified of Larry. Because Larry could seem a little bit dangerry, but Larry knew more than everybody.
Yeah.
Larry doesn't need anybody to make a comic. He can write, draw, he can do it all. He's an actor.
I didn't know that.
Boy, watching him go at a new creator who didn't do a good job drawing something was something I really admired.
Wow.
But he could then pull out a pencil and show you how to do it. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I could explain what was wrong, and then I'd have to trot you down to John Romita because I couldn't pull out the tracing paper and show this is what's wrong. I could fix your composition. I could fix your storytelling. Yeah. But trying to explain to you why that shoulder didn't work. That's what that was.
You can point it out.
My limit.
Yeah, it's kind of like me. It's like I can point out this is not working here, but I can't draw and fix it for you to explain to you how. Yeah.
Yeah.
Royal Airship says, looking sharp, gents. Thank you. Jay said, the only Marvel book I ever wanted to draw on was X-Men, but now I just do my own stuff. Probably a good thing here. Let's see. We got a question here from Royal. He said, would you say it's better to work on a lot of great projects for little money, to be associated with great names, and have the network?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, have the networking.
Yeah, it is, because, when you work with really good people on projects that don't pay you a lot, eventually when they get a good project, you will get to work on that. I began working with Tim Sale on, some like little cards and stuff for Dark Horse, and we were trying to get something together. And the next thing we did all that Long Halloween stuff, which is yet another thing I worked on that's been reprinted endlessly. And we did a lot of really great projects together that got me a lot of acclaim, got him a lot of acclaim.
I will confess, I did not realize that you worked on the Long Halloween.
Oh yeah, I've done it. Back then, if it was a project that anybody that was good, I probably got to touch it. Not that it was good because of me necessarily, but I did all that Marvel DC crossovers. I did Kelly Jones Batman, which that got reprinted recently.
There you go. Yeah, Pete's got it there in his hands.
And then there's a great one. They did this Kelly Jones Black Artist Edition. They didn't have all of Kelly's pages, so they reprinted some of my color guides in this giant hardcover book, and they paid me for that.
That's pretty cool.
That was cool.
Wow. Yeah. So outside of so Tommy, I know you had a question. Did you want to go ahead and ask that?
Yeah.
I think you said you researched long and hard for this question, didn't you?
I've done. Back in my Marvel days, I could swear that you were either an editor on something that I did or you wrote something I did, but I cannot prove that.
I can't either. I was looking for that too. Yeah. I don't know what it was. Because if you had done some kind of solo Avengers thing, but I did so many like backup stories and annuals and stuff, so it's possible you inked one of those.
Yeah, and I did so much ghost inking for Jimmy Palmiotti. Pretty much everything back throughout the 90s and stuff that I did. Yeah, some of the 2099 and all that kind of stuff. But it's and I swear, Roland and I were I've known your name forever. So yeah, and I'm just like, and then so I started looking it up. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna remind him about this.
Where
stuff.
is it?
And then like, no, I don't think so. I think it's just something I made up in my head.
I colored so much stuff. It's likely that I colored something. It's also likely that I wrote, because I wrote a lot of backup stories in Silver Sable that they used all kinds of people on. Highly possible you inked one of those.
Well, it's speaking of the Silver Sable stuff, because we're so like Roland was saying, we're so buddies with Stephen. We're all from Mississippi, and we all hung out when Stephen got the Silver Sable job and all that kind of stuff. And maybe I just assumed I was part of it.
Well, I don't know. It's funny though, because your name, I've known your name, forever.
Yeah.
I probably met you at the Mississippi Con that I went to that Stephen was at as well.
Probably so. I mean,
because Stephen was really eager to introduce me to everybody.
Yeah.
I really thought that it was the Night Watch stuff, but apparently that wasn't you.
No, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's so much stuff that I did that I've forgotten that I did that, and every once, because I went to a convention years ago, and this kid comes up with like 3 long boxes of comics, and he wants to know if I'll sign them all. And I'm like, why would I sign all these comics? He goes, this is all your work. And I was like, what? And he pulled out really obscure stuff that I'd colored 2 or 3 pages in that he had found my name. And I was like, yes, I will sign every comic. You're just going to have to wait. Because at that time I had lines of people. I said, I'll sign 10 at a time. He stayed there for like 3 or 4 hours as I signed stuff for other people. And then I do. But it was crazy. I was like, I don't even remember this stuff.
I get that same thing too with some of that stuff of Jimmy's. Jimmy every now and again got an editor to throw my name in, as help assistant inks or whatever. And I didn't know that Jimmy was doing it at some point. Golly, if it's something that Jimmy did,
you may have been helped out Jimmy on some Deathlock that I worked on.
Maybe so.
It's hard to say. It's like once you get mixed, when we get into that mix of, because there's a lot of comics. There's like 4 of us colored it.
Right.
I'll be damned to find out which pages I actually did color.
So I got to say this makes I know, because Tommy and I have been friends for a long time. This makes him incredibly happy, because one of the things I pick on Tommy about is we'll be talking about somebody and he'll go, "Wait a minute. Did I work with him on something?" And he can't remember, right? So
I'm terrible.
I remember joining something last week.
Nope, I don't.
But now, hold on now. In Tommy's defense, I can show him a page and he'll go, "Oh, yeah, I worked on some of that," right? Yeah. So he
I can tell you if I was working on it at the house and what we were watching on TV while I was filling in blacks or erasing.
Isn't that funny?
He can't remember creator names, and so I pick on him about this all the time. So I know he's absolutely ecstatic to hear you say you can't remember either.
Oh yeah, well, there's an issue of Mark Hazard Merc out there.
Okay, yeah.
I can never remember the issue of it, but Jim Owsley had been fired, and his assistant had to get the book out in the next 3 days, or he was going to be fired.
Oh, wow!
So it, so he got a whole bunch of us together to put this issue out in 3 days, and the script was written, and Mark Beecham had done thumbnails, so we Xeroxed Mark Beecham's thumbnails up, and a whole I don't even know how many of us there were, but there were, Bill Sienkiewicz did some of it. I penciled some of it, so we were, it was any number of people whoever happened to be in the bullpen light boxed these things off, and then whoever stuck around inked stuff. So I inked some pages of this thing, not anything significant, just a lot of backgrounds and stuff, and then we'd pass the pages on to somebody that actually could draw to ink the face. I would ink water and
somebody would come back over your stuff and fix it up
in 3 days. We banged that whole thing out. But I look at it now and I go, wow, I don't remember what I did, because there are pages I go, I inked a silhouette there because I couldn't ink this. But now it actually looks like a figure. So somebody had gone in, probably Bob Camp or Pat Redding had gone in and they fixed it. And then we put Mark Beecham's name on it. So if there were royalties, he'd get them.
Right.
Furious that his name was on this, because it looked terrible. It didn't look like Mark's stuff at all. So but it was just sort of funny. We're like, but Mark, if there was going to be royalties anyway, there's going to be royalties on Mark. Really? So yeah, but that was funny. So but I don't remember everybody that was involved, but it was a whole bunch of us.
Yeah.
A lot of it were Ramita's Raiders were involved, but there was a lot of actual pros. Bob Camp was one of them. Pat Redding. I think Larry Hama probably penciled a page or 2.
Wow.
But that was a great crash course. Mark Teixeira was there.
I know Mark.
He was laughing at me because I was pulling in blacks with a rapidograph, and he's like, "No. Let me show you how to do it." And he pulls out a brush, and he's, I'm like, "Yeah, but you're Mark Teixeira," and
that's right.
I went,
we're trying to get this.
It's not going to be for me.
Oh, listen.
But I did color about half of the book, and I decided, well, you know what, coloring I can do.
Right. I can remember many a time when Steve and I were roommates. He would say, and I quote unquote inked a bunch of stuff with him, right? But he would hand me this big old fat magic marker and say, every place that has an X, just
fill it in with a black.
Yeah, but it wasn't rapidograph. It wasn't a brush. It was a big old fat.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those jokers, kind of like this thing here.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that did that, and they a lot of people didn't realize that people were going to collect this art and that it would last as long as it has. So I think Gil Kane used to ink with these terrible markers or whatever.
Yeah.
And they faded or they turned brown.
Yeah.
And people get mad. Oh, this looks like crap. Well, it's my color guides. It's it's Dr. Martin's dyes and markers on a frickin' Xerox.
Right.
I haven't heard that anybody would want this stuff.
That was me when I first started with Jimmy.
A lot of the art, the original Marvel artwork is missing because some of it was just given away. Because who's going to want this? Animation cells, they used to wash all those off. So a lot of old animation, you'll never get a cell because they wash the cell off and reuse them.
Wow, I didn't realize
Disney,
that.
Warner Brothers, or they chucked them out. So a lot of the reason that those exist is people pulled them out of the garbage.
Huh.
It was just comics were very disposable.
Yes.
Back then, and nobody thought, that's why they were printed on that really cheap newsprint. Who's going to keep them? Well, everybody.
Right. Yeah. Vic says he didn't realize you did work at Marvel, Tommy. He's learning stuff every day.
Oh, gotta pay more attention.
Silverline needs to start doing backups. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Oven says, hello, Silverline family. What's up, Oven? Comic Talk says, hey, yo, Jay Lee, Hell Pops. Let's see. They're just talking amongst themselves here. Vic says, I've had to ink with a Sharpie. It was a dark day. Let's see here. They'd hand out original pages for kids to color.
Oh boy.
I've actually seen, some beautiful original black and white pages that Steve Olaf would then airbrush color on top of them for some kid that bought them.
Oh my gosh.
They go, oh, how could you do that? I'm like, well, because they paid him to.
Right. Yeah.
That's why. Why did I love somebody who was Larry Stroman was talking about somebody calling him a sellout. It's like sellout. This is our job.
Yeah.
So we're we take what we can, and sometimes you take a job for the money because this is our job. It would be great if we could just do the beautiful art that we always just want to do, but it's not the reality.
Right.
I did a comic this summer for the money, and I didn't really like it, but I liked the guy I was working with.
And you like the money.
And I got paid better for it than I get paid. I've gotten paid for stuff that I really like doing.
Yeah.
But you still need money.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no such thing as selling out. We're doing comic books.
Right.
And yes, we're very grateful that we get to do it.
Yeah.
But
and I think one of the things you said earlier on, I think is true, is that you take on jobs. You take on jobs for the money, so that you can do the job that you want to do.
Yeah.
I tell people a lot of times that, because I teach at the university, and I'm thankful that I have that job because it allows me the time and the freedom to make comics, at night. The university, they don't pay me a lot, but it pays my bills. And so I don't have to worry about, not paying the rent 1 month. And it gives me the freedom to do. And I think that's what, when you want to make comics, that's the thing that you do. You figure out how to get your responsibilities taken care of so that it frees you up to do the thing that you want to do. And you figure it out.
Because, once upon a time, comics paid really well. And now they really don't.
No.
And a lot of us are working in more of the independent stuff, which really doesn't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But a lot of the independent stuff I work on, I enjoy it more than some of the stuff I did for,
So let's talk about that. So what are some of the because I'll be honest, most of what I know of your work is Marvel stuff. Like the Long Halloween thing surprised me. And I've got it on my shelf in there. What are some of the independent stuff that you've worked on that you're happy about? and you want more people to know about? And what's some of the stuff that you're doing today?
Well, some of the first independent stuff I did. Well, actually, the first independent stuff I did was probably Savage Dragon with Eric Larson.
Oh, really? Okay.
I did the original first 3 issues of that. That was a lot of fun. And then I worked on a lot of Elephant Men with my friend Richard Starkings.
Okay, yeah.
I did a whole bunch of that.
The Comic Craft guy from those who know.
Craft, and then he
big time
published
letter
his own stuff. And then I did this crazy comic at Image. What was it called? It was about these high school kids who kind of took over a school. It was like a terrorist thing, except for they weren't actually terrorists, trying to make a point. Oh man, I can't remember what it was called, but it was brilliant. I can't. Wow, that's
my image readers here. You guys pipe up, help me remember what that is.
Yeah, I can't. It was. I try to remember who. That was. I was really proud of that too. So that's something kids.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah, you know what? You'll remember it as soon as we end the stream.
Yeah, I mean, if it was sitting on my shelf, I would try to grab it real quick. And then I've been doing a lot of work with Graham Nolan, who you may remember is co-creator of Bane.
Oh yeah.
So we did Joe Frankenstein together, and then I worked on some Monster Island with him, and we did Alien Alamo and Girls of Dimension 13. That Brett Blevins was the artist, and that was really Joe Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Which he's going to be putting this out again. And I actually have a new cover for Joe Frankenstein on my my desk right now that I'm working on. So
nice.
This was I was pretty happy with Joe Frankenstein.
That looks great. That looks fantastic. Yeah.
We did that together, and then we did Alien Alamo, and we're currently working on the Ghosts of Matacumba Key.
Right.
That's going to be a lot of fun to do. And this was I was very happy with this. The Girls of Dimension 13 that Graham wrote this. We did this for Aftershock.
Oh yeah.
And Brett Blevins did the art, and there's just some really crazy stuff that Brett did on here. So and I've known Brett forever. And Brett actually I had hired Brett for Nightbreed. Here's a funny story. Brett was on the New Mutants when Rob Liefeld took it over, and they moved Brett off of it. So I snatched him up to do Nightbreed, and my buddy DG Chichester, I had hired him to write Nightbreed. So they made the villain of the piece me. So Brett drew for like 5 issues. He drew my likeness as the bad guy in Nightbreed, which I thought was hysterical because he really, caught me. And I was like, wow, thanks, Brett. It was. It's a huge compliment, to when people, use you as a reference. But Dan
Absolutely.
even basically put the worst parts of my personality as part of a character, and so that was great. I'd love to have an actual original page of that. I don't know if Brett has any of that. I should make him give me a page of it. But I've known Brett. Brett, I met him when I was at Epic. He was doing the Boz Chronicles with David Michelinie.
Okay, yeah.
And he and I have been talking. Hopefully, he's going to do another Boz Chronicles, and I'm hoping to work on that with him. But Brett's he's a wonderful guy. He's a tremendous artist.
I never got to work with
one
him.
of the look, some Joe Frankenstein on the show.
Yeah. Comic Talk with Pop said we showed off some Joe Frankenstein on the show-offs earlier today.
Yeah, so Graham's going to be releasing the original miniseries through his current company it's his Compass Comics, and then hopefully he'll get another Joe Frankenstein series off, which I'm coloring the cover to the first reprint of the original series, so that'll be fun. That was a series to work on it. And Graham is a really fun guy to work with. He's a man of integrity, as I like to say.
I love Graham. Yeah.
You won't find anybody that ever worked with Graham or knows Graham that doesn't think he's a really, really awesome guy.
Yeah.
Another really talented guy. He's like me. He's kind of old school. Likes he likes real storytelling and actual drawing and.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about editing some. So I can't remember if we were had started streaming or if we were saying some of this before we started streaming.
That was before.
Okay. So so there's been a lot of changes in comics, right? We've seen a lot of I can't think of when I was a fan, you used to could name the editors, right? There was the Archie Goodwins, there was the Roy Thomases, there was the Mike Carlins, right? There were the editors who you're like, this you can see not necessarily their style, but you knew that certain editors got things done. Can you name very many editors today?
No, I mean, I'm not, I probably could if I was working in the industry more, the mainstream industry. But, Tom Brevoort's still an editor.
Right. I know Mark Benici is.
Tom started out his career as my intern.
Yeah, really?
And then he graduated to be, we got him a job as an assistant editor. He wound up being Dwayne McDuffie and my boss on Deathlock. So that was kind of interesting. And, now he's like the big guy at Marvel. Yeah. But he's still there. But, everybody else that I used to work with is kind of long gone from that. So I don't know who most of the editors are. And even the editors that I've worked with, never talked to them on the phone.
Yeah.
I got emails and, stuff like that. And that's, it's hard to, I need a face-to-face, otherwise I really don't care what you think. I care what the creators I work with think. Otherwise, it's just a very sort of different game. Marie Javins is, she's still an editor. I'm not sure she actually edits. She's, one of the people in charge of DC, and she started at Marvel as an intern, and she was not typical.
You probably know Jim Chadwick, right?
Through the ranks. She's always been one of the most respected people in the industry.
Yeah,
really knows her stuff. Another phenomenal. She's another great person. But most of the people that I think of as editors, people kept leaving staff because when I left staff, we weren't paid very much.
Right.
So I was making significantly more money doing freelance work part-time than I was on my staff job.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people left to go freelance because, it's fun to make comics and not just hire people to make them. But you made a lot more money.
Yeah.
I remember living in New York, you actually had to make some pretty decent chunk of change just to survive.
To live there? Yeah.
Yeah. I remember telling somebody.
It was fine when I lived in Brooklyn with 3 other people. But, later.
I had a freelancer yell at me one time. And I told him, I said, look, here's the deal. You're not going to yell at me because I don't get paid enough to listen to you yell at me. So if you're going to yell, I'm going to hang up right now, and we can either do this or we can not do this. But you're not going to yell at me
I just hang up.
Yeah, that's what my wife always says. She said you should just hang up.
You just hang up on me. I did. Click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or people came in. I had creators come into my office that weren't working for me and demand that I hire them because they were better than somebody else.
Oh.
And I'm like,
is that what I needed to do? I should have done that. I never thought about doing that.
I
didn't know you could get a job that way. I just thought I'd get escorted out if I did something like that.
Yeah,
I never had anybody come into the office.
Somehow I had to give a portfolio review to somebody in the office, and their stuff was just terrible. And I got to the end, and I was giving as much helpful advice as I could. And he goes, that's all cool and all, but that's my style. And I went, well, your style is
right.
I said, not being able to draw a character the same panel to panel is not a style. That's an inability to fucking draw. Would you like me to go on?
Right.
This is not storytelling. I don't know what this is. I don't know how you got into my office, but you've just wasted my time. You better never come near me. I couldn't believe it. It's like, this is not your style. Todd McFarlane has a style. He can consistently draw a character the same panel to panel.
Right.
He's got funky anatomy, but he's created his own anatomy, and it works. Panel to panel.
Vic's threatening me now. He says, "Hey, Roland, I'm better than Pete. Give me a job."
Give me a
But it was hilarious. They would come in. Well, I deserve that. What do you mean you deserve this? I get to decide who I hire, and guess what? I don't like your stuff. But I would get blunt sometimes because people just. I don't have time to, look at your new stuff every 5 minutes. I'm actually trying to get, a whole bunch of books out the door. And because I hired a lot of the guys from the Romita's Raiders, which was the staff art corrections guys that were like interns for John Romita. Because those guys were being taught by John Romita. So I knew if I needed somebody to, fix a panel that Tom Palmer couldn't fix, John Romita would make sure it got fixed right. So a lot of those guys got hired because they, Jose Marzan was one of those guys. He's a, top inker now. That's where he started. And we gave him work because he could do a great job. And then I think he was Joe Rubinstein's assistant for a while. And I believe Joe couldn't finish, had to stop inking something for me. And he said, "You should just give it to Jose." And I went, "You're right, I should." And Jose got a job. Again, but
what a
you
way
got
to talk
recommended
yourself out of a
from
job.
Jose.
Yeah.
He'd been working for me. I was like, yeah, you know what? I want something that looks like Joe. At the time, he was doing kind of more of a Joe Rubinstein style before he found himself. I think he found himself when he went to DC and, got away from us who expected the Joe Rubinstein sort of style. And he moved on his own. Very talented guy, happy to see him get very successful.
It's funny because Image used to raid our coloring department. We would lose a colorist probably every other week.
Oh yeah.
To Image, and finally the upper management said, "Okay, no more phone calls to the coloring department," because that's what they would do. They would call up the offices and ask to speak with them through there, and then make them the offer at the office. And so they took that away. But we used to also the Malibu editors. We used to poach the Image bullpens. They because a lot of those guys had, like Rob, had a whole staff of folks like Mark
he had a bunch.
Yeah, and we would get some of those who would come to see us and, hey, we want a job. I remember Dietrich Smith. The only one I really remember is Dietrich Smith, who was at Rob's studio. Dietrich ended up doing Nightman Wolverine for me. But yeah, so all that poaching kind of always happens. Aaron says everyone is better than Pete.
Oh yes. But I got the job.
But you got the job. That's right. Vic says they were being taught by one of the best, so they really did deserve the job. Talking about Romita's Raiders. So if you were to say, so I again, we're not looking to point fingers here, okay?
Just ask a question.
Yeah.
Roland is trying to get us in trouble.
What would you say is the biggest problem in comics today? And I don't just mean Marvel and DC. I mean in comics in general. When you read comics today, what do you think? And I'm asking you to put your editor's hat on here. What do you think are some of the biggest problems going on in the comics that you read today?
Well, the biggest problem in comics is we don't have enough readers.
Yeah,
that's the big problem.
I don't think an editor can fix that.
That's not really an editor. That's not really answering your question, but that is the big problem. A lot of it is, I hate to say this, but people have they've stopped writing comics and they really want to be writing TV. And they don't want to write comics that everyone could read. They all want to write comics that are really only for more of an adult audience, and that's fine. I love that kind of stuff too, but there's very few comics you can hand to a 10-year-old. So we're not building a younger audience. And, writing for comics that a 10-year-old can read doesn't mean that you write baby comics. Frank Miller wrote most of his Daredevil stuff under the Comics Code. Yeah. So,
and it's great.
Read that stuff. But, we don't really need to see comics that have the massive amount of violence and sex and the language in it that we're seeing all over the place.
Preach.
Some of it's fine, but we don't need it. So to me, it's just, comics have gotten way too mature, but they're not really mature, because they're not, a lot of them, they're not great stories. But some of them are, but some of them, they're allowing people to just kind of do what they want a little too much and not taking a little more editorial control.
Well, and that's maybe kind of where I was kind of trying to lead you a little bit, because I think that what we don't see a lot of is editorial. We see a lot of comics just being done without what looks, from my perspective, it doesn't look. I read something, I'm like, this is a good idea, but it really could have used a good editor,
right?
And it's not that I don't like it. A lot of the stuff I don't like, but I'll read it and it's like, well, this could be really good were it edited,
right? But we had that same problem, when I was an editor, because we had to get stuff out the door. So a lot of stuff, yes, that could have been better, but this is what we were able to do in the time that we have it. And I noticed with a lot of the independent comics, because I read a lot of that, they don't really have an editor, and it shows because, there was a lot of sort of self-indulgent material, and that's fine. It's your independent comic. You can do that. But, a lot of these stories could be tightened up. They could be made a lot better.
Yeah.
Or, some of them are terrible. But, I that's fine. You want to put out a terrible comic, not that you want to put out a terrible comic, but it's your independent comic, you get to do that. That's the whole point. If nobody buys it, that should be sending a message that maybe this wasn't good, but there's a lot of good comics out there that nobody buys, and that's sad too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've never even heard of. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is really good. How come I never, ever even heard of this? It's because I don't go to comic stores, and I go to, the New York Comic Con sometimes, and, I'm not aware. I'm too busy, I'm busy. I'm like you, I work at a school. I work with special needs kids. So that's my day job.
Cool. Oh, very cool. I did not realize that. Wow. Very cool. So you don't do a whole lot of conventions these days then?
I only go to like the New York Comic Con because it's local. And I only really go to see people. I don't.
Right.
I'm not getting a table. I'm not spending that money on a table that, that I'm not going to make the money back. So I go and I hang out with, people I used to work with, and I'm always amazed that some of them remember me. And unfortunately, a lot of people that I used to work with, they don't have a big line of people. So I can sit and, have a good 2-hour chat, with, people like, Rick Leonardi, nobody's, how can nobody be in his line?
Really.
Or even when Tom Palmer was alive, nobody would be over to talking to Tom. Even Ron Garney, he's done so well now. A lot of times, there's not a huge line of people. Lee Weeks, I can't get near anymore.
For
a while, he was easy to sit and do card tricks with.
Garney just did the Berserker.
I'm super happy to see him get that big success.
Me too.
With that. He is that good.
Yes.
And that guy was that good. Like pretty much from the get go. He's one of those guys that sort of came in and were, like, oh, and I was lucky. I got to work with him, early on. He did one of his first jobs as a Daredevil annual he did with me, where I created Crippler, who wound up in Silver Sable.
Very cool. It happens that way, doesn't it?
I'm old. I go way back.
Aaron says, I thought I was the biggest problem in comics industry. Well, Aaron, that is pretty much true, but
if you're not reading enough comics, you are.
Jay Lee says, bingo, the new writers are terrible and it's sad. DC and Marvel could be fixed if you had writers in there who knew comics and not tried to get a job in Hollywood. I actually think that if you had a stronger editorial, I don't read Marvel and DC today, so I can't say a whole lot of stuff about it, but I think that if they had editors who were more attuned to comics and not, as you pointed out, not to television, I think that we'd see better Marvel and DC as well. Ovid said the big two, assuming they'll keep all their old fans by doing this weird new stuff. Yeah, you probably know this better than me, but I know I've heard Stan Lee say before, and I think what you said about the younger readers is dead on. I've said this for years. The years part of the problem is that we're not building new readers anymore. We're trying to hang on to those old readers. And I remember Stan Lee saying, and you may help me with this to give me the actual quote, but he said something to the effect of Marvel's target audience was something like the 8 to 15 years old. and he expected the readership to cycle over. Yeah, some of them held on, but he expected the readership to change over every few years.
Yeah.
And so they were always kind of going on after that target audience. But then I've also heard him say that he was writing to target a college age. He said when they started doing the comics in the 60s, he said he was writing for the college age, but knowing that his readership was the 8 to 15-year-old.
He said, yeah, I mean, he said stuff like that, you know, and we used to say stuff like, you know, hey, just remember, this comic is somebody's first comic.
Oh, I love that quote too.
You know, you know, that's to me, that's a thing. I pick up a comic today, you know, and you know, Marvel and DC are doing some good stuff. That, you know, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you pick it up and you go, I don't know what I'm reading, because
exactly.
they haven't caught me up. They're not making, you know, they think, well, you know, if you read the other issues, I'm not going to read any other issues. You know,
and
when
I shouldn't have to.
I'd pick up an issue and I'd go, wow, I got to see, how can I find these other issues? Because it did explain what had happened before, and not in a big ham-fisted way. You know, they found skillful ways of doing it. But you know, it's just different. You know, I mean, I don't honestly know. You know, kids today, they're too busy with their cell phones.
Yeah.
You know, they don't read. Period. You know, the kids at school, we can't get them to read anything. You know, but I gave them a graphic novel or so from you know, that they're, you know, like those young adult graphic novels that have been coming out. That those are very popular. They love those, so they would read the comics. But where are they going to find them? Because comic stores are not very friendly to go to in a lot of cases.
No.
When I was a kid, I'm sure, you know, I used to go to the you know, corner store and there were comics. You know, at the grocery store there were comics. At the newsstand there were comics. Everywhere I went was different comics, so I was going to be exposed to them. Now you have to go into a comic store to find a comic, or a bookstore, but you know, they usually just have the trade paperbacks. It's you know, that's to me, you know, that's the other big problem is, you know, they're not as accessible as they used to be, and I don't really know how to get the current audience, the current people that you want to get reading to read them. You know, if I could figure that out, you know, I'd make a lot of money.
Yeah, you'd be a rich man, right? So we'll give Pete and Tommy a chance to ask the questions here. Let me get here. Vic says, so did Roberta jump from being a pack rat to an image colorist? No, Roberta stuck it out with isn't that what they call the Malibu colorist? So the Malibu colorist, they each had teams. They were put together in teams, and each team had their own name. They had things like the Violent Hues and the Prisms, and I can't remember all of them. Roberta'd have to tell you what that was. Look at this, Vic. Thank you, Vic. Vic says, speaking of buying good comics, Silverline has a Kickstarter. Support it. Cape Town starts up in Friar Rush. Yes, we do have a Kickstarter going on right now, folks. So jump on over there, please, and support it if you can. If you can't, if you don't have the cash, you can share it. So get over there and share it to all your friends and tell them that Silverline is 21 campaigns, 21 fulfilled on time. Let them know that. Let's see. Aaron says, I still think the reader issues to a degree has to do with kids are more interested in digital media like video games. I can't even get my nephews to read the comics I make. Yeah, that's
I mean, you know, because when I was on staff, there really wasn't a lot of competition. You know, video games were those chunky pixel things, and movies couldn't do any of this stuff. So the only way you were going to get stories like you get in a comic was to read a comic. And very quickly, you know, money is going to the video games, money is going to the streaming services, the internet, and then the cell phones ruined it completely. So I don't know how you bring them back to that. You know, I mean, I thought when the movies started coming out and they were great, I went, people will read comics again. Nope.
No.
They just like
wanting more movies.
I have my own theories about that, but we'll cover that another time. Jay says, as for editors, yes, I agree. A good editor is worth every dollar. The one who worked with me on my novels turned my books into masterworks. Very thankful for great editors. Yep.
But there are some terrible editors. You know.
Oh, there are. Yeah.
And you know, we've all made a colossal mistake here and there as well. So, you know, it's hard to tell when you read a book whose fault it really was.
Yes, right. Owen says, I only see Batman number 451 and Spider-Man 800. and I give up on comics. I like what indies do. They're similar to manga. They have one or two creators. Yeah, well, of course, you know, you don't have to go very far on this channel to know that we are huge supporters of indie comics here. So, so Pete, Tommy, y'all have questions you want to ask?
Okay, it's a bit of a long question, though. Well, I think it's going to be quite a difficult answer. Not a difficult answer. It's a long answer. So,
well,
if you're an
ask it
independent
anyway.
creator, how important would you say to them they have to go and they should get an editor if they're making their own book, or they're hiring an artist to do their book?
It depends on the creator. I mean, Walt Simonson really doesn't need an editor.
Yeah.
But that's Walt Simonson.
Right.
Most people, I'll tell you right now, there's some very high end creators that they have hired their own editor just to make sure that they don't write shit, because it's very difficult to understand that your stuff is working when you're so close to it. So you need that second pair of eyes on it. Everybody should have some form of an editor, just to keep you honest, if for no other reason. But some people are able to do it. I don't think Eric Larson uses an editor. He works in a very strange manner. I think he just starts doing it, and if it's not working, he has to redraw a bunch of pages, and it's been working for him for almost 300 issues of the Savage Dragon. So
going close to 300.
For some people, they can do it without. But Eric also, he did edit comics for that he hired people to do. And when he first started editing some of the comics that he'd hired people, the first thing he told me, he goes, wow, people really do screw up, don't they? And I went, yes. He goes, so that's why you were so pissed. And I went, yes. But it's a lot of work to try to do your doing your own comic. It's not just, well, I wrote this comic and I'm going to hire an artist and they're going to do a great job. No, they're going to lie to you, and they're not going to turn it in on time. And you're going to have to figure out how to make them redraw the stuff. And, oh, by the way, you got to make sure you got to know all the production ins and outs.
Yeah.
And
what would you do
with all of that? Sometimes, maybe your story is crap and you didn't even know it. And it could have been fixed like that if you had an editor.
So how would you approach it if you had, so these guys, making comics is their hobby, but it's not their main job. So they have to go away and do a job. Right. So they can't turn in 4 pages a week. So how would you monitor that? How would you oversee that?
Well,
basically,
you create a schedule that they can manage, and you try to get them to stick to it. But that's the problem when it's not, when it's your hobby.
Yeah.
You
can't say to them, we need it.
It's a hobby,
right?
We're going to work.
You're going to take it seriously. You have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I
can't really say,
well, I'm going to draw a page a week.
That page was supposed to be here last week. What did you do?
Pages. Well, I've had a busy week. I can't.
Oh well, then I guess you don't really care. And I'm not. If I'm editing somebody's book and they're doing a hobby, I'm going to lose interest. I can't spend 4 years editing your stupid, 22-page comic. I need to go. I'm going to spend, some time on it, and then I'm going to expect you to do your part. And they don't do it. They don't do it. It's a lot easier to being on staff because I could fire your ass.
Right.
But working on Epic Comics, those are creator-owned comics, and I can't fire you off your own comic, and I can't make you do the work. What I can do is I could say, well, we're not going to publish it now.
Yeah.
But we didn't usually have that problem because people that wanted to do it actually wanted to do their projects. But a lot of projects that never came out, they didn't come out because people didn't finish them. I had a couple of those. There's this infamous Nick Fury Punisher graphic novel that Jim Lee and I were working on, and it was all we plotted it together, and he laid the whole thing out, and he inked about 20 pages, and then this stupid little tiny book called The X-Men came and took him away, and he didn't get back to that. And then he did this little thing called Image Comics, and that kind of took him away a little further, and then he decided to go be a bigwig at DC. So it never got finished because nobody gave us a contract to make us finish it, but we never got paid because we refused to be paid because we knew somebody would ruin it if they owned it. Marvel doesn't actually own what we did. So they were going to do something. I said, you can't touch it. I said, you don't own it. Like, what do you mean? It says, you didn't give me a contract, and neither Jim or I have been paid, and you can't pay us just because you feel like it. It belongs to us until we voucher for it.
To finish it.
Because they would have, hired whoever they wanted to finish it. I'm like, nope. And I said, no, I won't finish it with anybody but Jim. So it'll be this, unfinished thing that really makes me sad.
Yeah, one of the great unfinished works, right?
Yeah, well, the stuff Jim was doing on it, I think, is some of his best work. So it's sad that, people have seen some of it, but it really would have been a nice work for both of us. But I really thought, some of Jim's really, some of his coolest stuff. Plus, it's real Nick Fury.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love Samuel L. Jackson, but he's not my Nick Fury.
No, he's the movie Nick Fury.
He's movie Nick Fury, and he's great for the movie.
Yep.
But that's not my Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos guy.
Yeah.
Which Stephen got to draw a lot because I put him in anything I wrote. I constantly put him in
big
stuff.
Cigar chomping, right?
Always had the cigar.
Yep.
Yeah. Not allowed to draw that anymore now. Apparently.
That's what I've heard.
Like, really? So the Thing doesn't get to smoke a cigar either.
Yep. Yeah, that's too bad. It's part of what part of their character, I thought.
Well, it is. Well, there was this. It's funny. There was this children's book. I think it was called Here Comes Santa Claus or something, and it was this beautiful painted storybook, and in it, Santa smokes a pipe.
Of course.
When he's done. They reissued the book and they painted out all of the smoking. So Santa's now like, he's got his hand up here with nothing in it. And it's like, come on, because well, this will obviously make kids want to smoke. No, it doesn't.
No, I didn't want to smoke just because I saw Nick Fury or the Thing smoking a cigar.
Yeah, my parents smoked and it was horrible, and I tried it and it was horrible, and no thanks. And now I got to chase kids trying to vape, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
What happens if I vape? Well, first I'm going to take your pipe and I'm going to crush it. That's the first thing. And the second thing that's going to happen is now you're going to have a little chat with the principal and your parents.
Yeah.
See what happens at that point.
Fortunately, we don't allow that in the university, in the halls. They can do it outside, but they can't do it in the halls.
We don't allow it in our school either, but what I don't allow, and what we don't allow, and what somehow creeps into the building every once in a while that I got to go deal with is another matter.
Yeah. Pete, more another question, or more to the question, or?
I don't think so. I'm only thinking because I've written a comic and I'm going to draw it myself, but because I've got so much work going on, I can never get to doing it. And I'm like, maybe if I had an editor, it would keep me on task. But the fact is, I've got too much work to do.
Yeah, that's a problem. When you have work, you don't want to work on the vanity project.
Yeah.
Well, you want to,
I want to, but I've got other people relying on me. Well, that's just me.
Yeah, it's sad when you have to do that. That's a very common tale. There's a lot of people that. I had worked on several projects that people just didn't do the work because this was their little extra project, but they had to do the regular work. So the extra project just didn't get quite done, and it was very frustrating for me. But they like exactly what you said. People depending on them and bills to pay, and the project that they were doing for me might not make them much money. And when the X-Men calls you, and when it's true. It's like somebody says, "Oh, well, you want to draw Spider-Man?" Yes.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
It's. I get that. The thing is, as a colorist, we weren't getting royalties, so I don't give a crap what book you think it would be good for me. It's all about, do I like this artist?
Right.
Wait, Kelly Jones drawing this stupid book. I'm going to color that.
Yeah.
I don't need to be on the X-Men. Are you going to pay me more? No. I'm not going on there because that's going to be 10,000 times more work because it's a book, a book with lots of characters.
Yeah.
I'd rather color Daredevil.
Right. Red? Yeah.
Very easy to color Daredevil.
Do they still not pay colorist royalties?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I did get royalties on and reprints on several things I did because I got contracted.
Yeah. I would imagine that's changed.
I don't think so usually. I don't know. I haven't done any work for Marvel in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but
especially the way color is today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of colorists doing way more work than the inkers doing.
Yeah.
Not as bad as it used to be. There was this time when everything kind of looked like I don't know, not a coloring book, but like just outlines, and then the colorist was filling in everything.
Oh my goodness.
And we've kind of gotten away from that. We're back to like what I call real comic art that's finished.
Yeah.
But again, colorists are doing so much on top of that. But now you got pencilers and inkers who are actually doing gray work on it. So it's like a gray painting.
Right.
And then a colorist is going in and colorizing that. I don't even know what you do in those cases. I mean, I've done a little bit of that, but it's pretty insane what you're seeing out there. It's a huge amount of work going into a lot of comics, and it's costing a lot of money, which is why the comics cost money, and that's not really gaining readers. So I don't know what would fix that.
Well, it's funny because I will sometimes make I don't know that make them mad is the right thing, but I will agitate some of them sometimes when I'm talking to artists. And keep in mind that we are talking about independent stuff here. An artist will say, hey, well, this is going to take me, this page will take me 10 hours to do. I'll look at the page and I'll say, well, you probably could have made this shortcut or this shortcut or this shortcut. Yeah, I probably could. I said, and then you probably could have done that page in maybe 7 hours. It's like, yeah, I probably could have. And I'm like, so here's the question I have for you. Are you going to sell so many more copies for spending that extra 3 hours that it makes those extra 3 hours worth it? And the answer is almost always, no, not really. Those extra 3 hours I spent on that page is not going to sell that many more copies to make that worth it.
But that's something that changed at some point, because when I was on staff, artists understood I need to get X amount of pages done. Right. So if you look at, the way things like a boot was drawn, it was a very simple boot. Mm-hmm. Now today you'll look at a boot and it's got, all the laces and every little thing. I mean, it's all this stuff that, and it's sort of expected, from the artists. So they're putting a lot more work into the page than they used to. I mean, you look at, go back and look at, Kirby's pages, and there's things are a lot simpler, bigger, just bigger stuff. And, you'll look at, a lot of other pages and you just see this massive amount of detail. I'm looking at, this page that he's inking, and, there's a lot of detail on that page that might not normally be on a page, an old school page.
Well, so let me ask you a question. So do you think printing has affected that at all? Because
because back then the printing was shit. So if you did all that little detail work, it was never going to show up.
Right.
But that never stopped Barry Windsor Smith from putting it in anyway. But because he couldn't help himself,
and they complained about
it. Do anything any different. But now, because printing has gotten better, you can not only get away with all that detail showing up, you can do all that gray work and all kinds of other stuff that will show up. And you have colorists who are actually not just putting a blob of blue all over it; they're actually rendering in, so you're getting these pages to look in the way you dream that they're going to look.
Yeah. And they're beautiful.
So
pages.
that's a huge effect. Because I used to tell inkers, it's like, stop inking this way. When I don't know if you remember that flexographic printing nightmare, where it was like between the like the Mando printing, and the cheap printing, it was this sickeningly bright, almost neon, hurts your eyes. But the black plate, the black would chip off. So a lot of line work just would never show up in the book because it wasn't even on the film anymore. It would just chip off after a while. And so if you inked with those little skinny lines, it's not going to show. Which is why, you look at, the way, say, Joe Sinnott inked, it was always going to print. The way Tom Palmer inked, it was always going to print. Mm-hmm. Al Williamson's stuff didn't always print because he got a lot more thin lines and stuff in there, but it printed pretty good. But it's a big deal that the new printing. I mean, the printing's gotten way better in the last 10 years. Because it used to be, you remember some of those Malibu comics, how horrifying they looked by the time they printed. Mm-hmm. They were oversaturated, and some of it was because of the way the separation's being done, but mostly it was shitty printing. And nobody knowing how to deal with that. So and you'd see color just sort of wipe out big detail.
Oh yeah.
I had that problem on stuff I worked. I had to figure out how do I, I started coding again. I told the seller, I said, no, you will follow my codes.
Yeah.
Because I don't want this oversaturating. And sure enough, though, it would get printed on the wrong paper with the wrong ink, and it would be a mess. So
that's like a whole nother stream there, right?
It's a whole other ball game of God.
But I absolutely love that. Tommy and I talk about this thing, the coloring and oversaturation quite a bit. My clock though tells me it's 9:34, so we've come to an end. I have absolutely enjoyed it. Can we ask you to come back sometime?
Of course.
Excellent. So.
We'll figure out what Tom and I worked on before.
I'm gonna keep researching it.
I was looking that up because I was like, I know we've worked on something.
I would swear. I told Roland just what was it yesterday? I was like, I more than 99%. I'm like 100% sure that you and I did something. I don't know if you were an editor or if you were a color, or if you were the writer.
A writer, an editor, or even as a colorist.
But then when I went to go look it up, I could not find anything.
I know. At least we can look this stuff up now. But I looked stuff up. I'm like, I worked on what?
Yeah. Let's see here. Hold on. Let's see. Jay said, enjoyed listening to you all. Vic says, hey, Roland, I'm waiting for my rejection letter. I got to be nice to you, Vic. Let's see. Let's talk about comics and Gil Kane and blah, 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 blah. So Tommy didn't ask a question I thought he was going to ask you. So,
which the name thing?
Yeah.
All right. Here you go. Greg or Gregory?
I credit myself as Gregory, all the time, but nobody calls me Gregory. They call me Greg.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I have the same problem.
They call me Mr. Wright, which
yeah.
That was hard to get used to. But yeah, I like being credited as Gregory, but it's been credited both ways. I pretty much answer whatever.
I've got
Are
the
you
same
Thomas,
thing.
Tommy, Tom? What are you?
Well, when it was the official in the comics and all that kind of stuff, Thomas, right? Yeah. Thomas Jr. because my dad. But you noticed everybody, Roland and Peter, they'll call me Tommy and all that kind of stuff. But never Tom. So it's either Thomas or Tommy, and my dad is Tom. So there you go.
Yeah.
So Vic, you're out there. You call me Thomas or Tommy?
We'll let you guys figure that out. Meanwhile, where can folks find you on the interwebs? If they wanna look and see what else Mr. Gregory Wright has done.
Mr. Gregory.
Well, I'm on Facebook more than anything else.
Okay.
And I'm just Gregory Wright under there. And I'm on Instagram. I think it's G Wright stuff on Instagram, maybe. Let me look real quick.
Okay.
But mostly, on Instagram, it's all about food. Yeah, it's G Wright stuff on Instagram. Okay. Mostly, it's pictures of food that I made. Some comic stuff occasionally. I don't really hang out on Twitter much. I check it out like once a week or so. If people mention something, I'll like it, or if somebody has a question, I'll answer it. I'm pretty easy to find and ask questions too. I'm on a lot of like the like Facebook comic sites. I'm on some of Rob Liefeld's sites and stuff. I comment on a lot of his stuff. I gave Rob Liefeld his first Marvel work actually.
Oh, that's cool.
But I don't get credit for it because Mark Rummel told me to. Well, Mark had met Rob at I think a San Francisco convention, and he came back and he was so excited about this kid that he'd met, and this kid's going to be the next Jack Kirby and blah blah blah. And I was like, holy crap! Give him that Black Panther story. And I'm like, we don't have a Black Panther story. He goes, I promised him a Black Panther story. And I said, well, what the hell did you do that for? We don't have a Black Panther story. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we'll give him some Marvel Universe stuff. And he goes, what do we got? And, and I can't remember the name. I mean, Rob's talked about it. I can't remember, but it was a group of them. So I called him up and, Rob was great. And I enjoyed Rob. And I sent him this thing. I think it was about 12 figures he got to do. And he did them really fast. And before I could get some work for him. DC snatched him up for I think
No.
Warlord.
Oh,
And I
okay.
said, don't worry, Rob. I'm going to get you something, you know. And when he finally came back, everybody wanted it. So, but yeah, so I actually, you know, gave him that first Marvel Universe handbook of the Marvel Universe was the first work he did for Marvel, and
Nice.
yeah, that was fun. So I've known Rob forever. So I do follow his Robservations. If you're not watching Robservations, they're fantastic. And I comment on that a lot because a lot of his stories, I was there. So I can confirm that, yes, this is what happened. But it's interesting because I have a different version of the story than Rob has. So we've been comparing notes a little bit because it's one of those things, you know, when your editors will tell different people different versions of the story. And then as a creator, I know the people involved. So I know another version. So I kind of try to put as many of them together and say, okay, what actually happened here? And Rob's that, you know, he can't stay away from controversy. So Rob was always involved in some story that had some controversy to it, and you know, Rob people love to just blame Rob. Guess what, you know, Rob wasn't the bad guy here.
Right. Yeah. All right, Pete, what about you?
You can kind of find me on there's a lot of those, or you know, like Facebook comic book sites, and I'm on a lot of those. I wish I could remember all the names of them. Like I'm blanking, but I'm there.
All right, y'all look him up, follow him, send him a request. Pete, what about you? Where can folks find you on the interwebs?
Just type in Peter Clinton art, and there I am.
What are you working on
right
now?
What am I drawing right now?
What are you being paid to draw right now?
So I'm doing Silverline Team Up. I'm doing a book called Magic Items with a writer called Ned Hartley. He's in the UK here with me. And I'm drawing something called Morbid Justice with a writer based in New Jersey. And he found me on the Cuba School website. And I've written and created my own. I've done a 6-page issue of my own thing, which we published last year just to print, to see how it came out. And we're working on issue 1 of that at the moment. But I say we, it's me and my friend Jose.
Yeah.
He colors it. I do everything else. So I am busy.
That's good.
And he's got a 8-month-old baby.
And I got a baby. That's really impacted
a lot of work.
my turnover.
Yeah. I recall that. A lot of work.
Yeah. Tommy, what about you? Where can folks find you on the interwebs?
Just go on the Googles and type Florimonte. I know I spell it every day or every time for you guys. FLORIMONTE. Mostly on Facebook, but you know, I've got the other stuff. If somebody asks me a question, I'll get with them. And then over at Kablam, if you guys need anything printed, just let me know.
Excellent. You can find me on all the appropriate social media. Just look for Roland Man. Sometimes it's Man Roland, like it is on Twitter. I don't know what's going to be for the Tuesday show, but the Wednesday Whammers are going to be talking to Chris Wozniak about this Batman stuff that's going on. I don't know the whole story, so I'm anxious to see. What's up to.
It's a story.
Next week, it's a story. That's what I've heard. It's a story. So they're calling the episode Batman Gate. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on next week.
He's an interesting guy.
Yes, yeah. I met Wise. I think Tommy did too back in the 90s. I haven't talked to him that much in recent years, but next week we will be back with Jerry Bingham, who will be back and hang out with us a little bit. So
we got to put the
Greg, hang out a few minutes after the stream ends here. We'll chat a little bit. But you guys know, until next time, remember to make mine Silverline. Good night, everybody.
I'm April Hunter. Make mine Silverline.
All right.